Yeah, welcome everybody. Thank you for taking the time to participate here in our second public online conference in the project Strategic Foresight for Sustainability, short SF4S. It's the second public conference and will focus on the work we've been done so far and reflect upon the expert interviews, the co-development projects, and the academic courses that are being developed and already taught right now. I'll do just a short introduction, then I'll hand over to Tony Alquist from the Finland Futures Research Center for a presentation on the insights, mainly from the expert interviews. Afterwards, we'll step into breakout rooms and talk about the co-development and the mobility and agri and health cluster. I'll briefly tell you what that is. And in the end, we'll have a sharing session about learnings from our academic courses. On the one hand, from EDEC, which René Rohrbeck will give you some insights about, and then Samrina Jaffrin here next to me from HMKW will tell you about how we approach the teaching of these topics here. Then we'll also have another breakout room on this where Taltech and Design School Kolding are also presenting their approaches. So that's the agenda for the next 2 hours. And I'd say let's step right into that. Since it's a public conference, those from within the project have already seen this here a few times. It's the basic motivation behind this project and the challenges we're trying to address in the SF4S project. One is are the industry needs for increased futures literacy and accessibility of foresight methods. So one thing that we learn is that there is a high level of uncertainty organizations are dealing with. There is a range of existing foresight methods, but they are kind of tricky to apply, and some industry partners issued the need to make these methods more accessible. Our question here, how can we promote futures literacy in organizations and mainstream the utilization of according foresight methods? Second challenge is a neglect of values and normative future scenarios in innovation management. That's also relating to all the issues of sustainability reporting, also taking that to the next level of the foresight, not only thinking about the social, ecological, and economic value contribution that organizations can do today, but also in the future. Here the question is, how can we facilitate the adoption, and particularly of normative scenarios to deal with upcoming innovation challenges? And that's one reason why we're combining an exploratory and a normative approach within this project. Third, there's a need to integrate currently distributed efforts to manage future scenarios, sustainability, and innovation. If we look into the corporate landscape, oftentimes these capabilities are distributed across the organization, sometimes into different departments. So we're looking for a more integrated approach here, bringing stakeholders within and without and outside the organizations together to address great challenges we're all facing today. And last but not least, we have the need also regarding education and professional development to advance green, digital, and foresight skills in higher education and professional development. And we're looking for new ways and methods, cases to facilitate these activities. That's the background, the motivation for our project. How are we dealing with that, or what are we covering today here during this public conference? We're giving a brief overview from the results from the 3 initial work packages, expert interviews, co-development projects, and education and training materials that we're developing. And we're doing this, especially the co-development projects, in 2 clusters. We have different companies, different academic partners also focusing on 2 different clusters here. One is the mobility cluster, where we have really strong industry partners, including Airbus, Lufthansa Help Alliance, SOS from Denmark, Michelin, and Comodule, a micro-mobility provider from Estonia. And then we have the second, the agri, food and health cluster, we call it, involving companies such as Larsen Coffee, Nordic Foodtech, LaMuu, North Estonian Medical Center, and Region Mid. And this cluster is facilitated by EDEC and Design School Kolding. And that's, I think, already enough to give you a short overview. Will not bore you more with the details of our work packages, but I'd say I'll hand over to Tony, and let's jump right into some of the initial results we gained from our expert interviews and community building activities. Tony?
Okay, thank you, Henning. I will just start to share. Okay, you can probably hear and see it now.
Yes.
Very good.
You need to go full screen.
Yep. Okay, I will present a very brief outlook on key results of the interview round and the synthesis report we have been producing during this year. So the basic point is that we have been doing quite extensive round of interviews. So we have had 91 face-to-face interviews done by our research partners, and then we have done 2 focus group and webinar sessions. So we had 138 calculable interviews in total. And as you can guess, it's not very easy to wrap up everything in a very short presentation, but I try to give up some impressions and some takes on each cluster, and then some bit more overarching perspectives from the interviews. Why this sample is interesting? It's mainly interesting in 4 ways. The sample is extensive in its organizational and geographical coverage, so it covered different organizations in the 3 clusters Henning mentioned. So agri-food, health and mobility, but also different kinds of policy and consultancy actors that are relevant in these domains. It also contained plenty of interviews that integrated more generalist approaches like perspectives of foresight, policy and consultancy. And this sample that we have been gathering, which is quite extensive, it provides plenty of insights into perceived barriers and opportunities for digital and sustainable transformations within this organizational context. And it also provides a lot of perspective for the project to utilize this data, because there is plenty of data that can be localized and bring into different contexts. So this interview data can be utilized in very many ways, not just in synthesizing certain perspectives, but also plenty of localized perspectives are possible to tease out. If we go to key insights in different clusters, one could say that in the agri-food cluster, I just look at in the agri-food cluster, I have now selected a few insights that are the following. So there were especially goals and metrics of sustainable development were highlighted, and also that there should be digital applications that have different kinds of science bases, that a lot of digital applications do not have a scientific basis that is fit for agri-food cluster, and that was one key insight when thinking about the digitalization in the domain of agri-food cluster. Some quote from the interview was that these goals and metrics are important, and it is very important for defining and measuring sustainability, and of course there cannot be any other types of businesses in agri-food sector than sustainability, which was mentioned in different interviews in one way or the other. Digitalization was especially highlighted through different kinds of collaborative platforms, and these collaborative platforms were important for building new connections, for example, between consumers and farmers, but also different kinds of trading platforms for different kinds of agricultural products. Also, another aspect of digitalization is how to emphasize the traceability of products, so giving a sort of like life cycle assessment type of perspective to the sources and origins of agricultural products. That was assessed as very important in different interviews. When it comes to innovation and change, there were a couple of interesting ones, and here I have now sort of selected a couple of that seem to be more deviations, but interesting perspectives. One was that innovation events and different kinds of systemic analytical approaches, such as life cycle assessment, were highlighted, but also the notion that we should have different kinds of perspectives to the transition itself. So we should have capabilities of narrating change in different contexts when it comes to agri-food sector. So agri-food is very localized type of domain, and therefore the transition stories and transformations should be communicated in multiple ways. That was very interesting point that was raised in few interviews. And of course, different kinds of system level perspectives were highlighted. One was that there are a lot of cultural barriers in agri-food sector, intergenerational issues, but also these kind of change issues that comes to, for example, our cultures of eating and using different kinds of resources. There was also a need for new kinds of funding structures for catalyzing entrepreneurship in the agri-food domain, and interesting perspectives on regulation, for example, a policy fast track for the approval of novel food to excel innovation and green transition. If we wrap up some perspectives from the health domain, that's again a bit different kind of domain, and there are 4 important trends that were highlighted in the interviews and focus group discussions. A growing demand supply gap in health services, and the second point was that the work practices, especially in the hospital and health sector domain, has been becoming more sustainable. So sustainability aspects are more highlighted in the actual working practices. The role of the patient is shifting via new technologies, so a lot of personalization, digital applications for measuring patient and also different kinds of ways of communicating with patients and doctors. And then one trend that is highlighted is here clustered as significant generational differences. So there are a lot of generational aspects on how personalized medicine could be applied, how digital applications could be utilized, and so on. And this was especially emphasized in health sector interviews. And based on the interviews in the synthesis report, we created 4 images of the future, which are the following ones. So first image of the future highlights this health care system under stress, which seems to be quite universal situation in health sector in Europe nowadays. Then the second image of the future is a well-being in a resource-scarce world. So how to combine this resource scarcity and the notion of well-being. Third image of the future highlights digitalization as an enabler of efficiency and sustainability in the health sector. And then there was one quite interesting perspective that emphasized sort of change aspects and change activities that come from within the health sector. So we were calling them change revolts. So kind of like directions and powers of change that come from within the health sector and from localized sites of these troubles and resource scarcities within the system. As one interview said, that the main goal of digitalization of healthcare should be reducing time that healthcare professionals spend. Everything else will derive from that. And this was especially connected with the idea that actually a lot of digital applications increase the workload and not decrease it. And the aim should be to decrease the workload. Some key highlights from the mobility cluster, which is again a bit different domain. There were a lot of technological emphasis in the interviews, so technological solutions were emphasized more than in other clusters. They were, for example, talking about virtualization of planning processes, digital twins, all kinds of novel virtual tools that can be utilized to plan mobility infrastructures, but also electrification of vehicles and mobility instruments in general. Key aspects of change in mobility sector to wrap up: a lack of awareness about the possibilities of sustainability. So still sort of awareness raising should be important aim. Age and culture gap between decision makers and mobility users. This is kind of like the same issue that comes through every domain, that there is this generational issue on how to apply different digital solutions, and it amounts to this kind of age and culture gap between different generations. In a mobility sector, there are a lot of legacy systems that set quite peculiar circumstances when applying novel infrastructures, and these new digital infrastructures need to be retrofitted to these legacy systems more or less. And this was especially a point that was highlighted in the mobility sector and mobility domain. But digitalization was primarily perceived as an enabler of sustainability. And of course, this digitalization as an enabler of sustainability came through quite powerfully in all of the interviews that we were doing, or most of the interviews that we were doing in all of three domains. One very important perspective is this sort of polycrisis situation that was highlighted in all of the domains that we were studying. And here, mobility sector interview says that the biggest challenge at the moment is the complexity and simultaneity, a multi-crisis situation, that everything is happening at the same time. And then just to a perspective to the capabilities that were highlighted in the interviews, one could say that foresight capabilities came through quite powerfully in all of the interviews. So it was evaluated as the key emerging capability, one could say, in all domains. Of course, the foresight was perceived in different ways. So some interviewees saw it more like as methods, a use of different kinds of digital applications that could forecast some trends or some resource use or something like that. And others saw it as more like a capability of workers that they should have more foresight perspectives and more wide systemic understanding of the domain that they are working in. Of course, one highlighted benefit of foresight is that it enables specialists to think strategically about the future. When combined with domain expertise, foresight brings the capability of more long-term strategy making and also more long-term thinking in very practical ways in day-to-day practices in the business domain. Of course, there is a lot of interest in showing in the interviews on data-driven, so-called evidence-based approaches, AI-based approaches, and also scenario-based approaches that open up different alternatives towards the future. Also, other related capabilities were were teased out from the interview. So one is, of course, this need for wider systems thinking, which was very much emphasized, I think, in all of the 3 domains. So there is truly a need to think in a bit more wider context and capabilities of assessing the impacts of different practices is a rising capability in all 3 domains. Of course, digital capabilities are important, especially analysis, management, and visualization of data. But then there are also a couple of very interesting capabilities that came in different forms in different interviews. One is what we call here social and cultural competences. So ways to communicate transition stories, ways to network in different ways, how to narrate different changes in different contexts in all these 3 domains, but also more of aspects of emotional intelligence, even empathy were highlighted as key capabilities in the future. And different also what we here call new literacies were also mentioned, like information or data literacy, sustainability literacy, algorithmic literacy, and of course, what we are pushing in this project, a futures literacy. And just to wrap up the sort of the key atmosphere and key intake of the interviews could be put in a bit of a paradox form. So one could say that there was the sentiment and atmosphere that the old is too old, but the new is still too new. So we are in between different periods, different sort of transition moments, and there seems to be a lot of confusion on how to integrate older systems to these newer digital solutions and how to move forward. So variations of this paradox were present in many interviews, and it was in many interviews assessed that existing practices are seen not as fit for future. So now the solutions are increasingly sought from digitalization and innovation, but still there seems to be a plurality of different options that brings out a lot of confusion. So one could say that we are living in an intermediate period. So no new solutions are considered not yet proven at scale, and there is plenty of confusion on how future systems will be configured. And this is, I think, one of the lessons that will be highlighted in the continuing work packages in this process. And then again, this interesting quote that biggest challenge at the moment is complexity and simultaneity, a multi-crisis situation, that everything is happening at the same time. And this is the point that I will now end this presentation and leave you with. So thank you.